So hi, I'm Bruce Schneier. Thanks for coming to Hack in the Box Virtual. I'm sorry I can't be there. I'm sorry we all can't be there. But we're in a global pandemic and nobody's flying, so this is the best we got. So I received a bunch of questions from you, and I'm going to try to answer them all. And hopefully this will be a fun session.
What is the impact of COVID on the security status quo?
It's a really interesting question, and there's a lot going on here. That I think the biggest impact of COVID is that we are all doing things differently. And you can think about a lot of security attacks are based on convincing people to transfer money, that things are different and you should do things differently. A lot of business email compromise and fraud is based on that. And we are all right now doing things differently, which makes us all vulnerable. There are other things that matter in COVID. A lot of us are using insecure home computers, right? We were working at work and now working at home, and we're using our home machines. They're not very secure. Sensitive data has moved outside of corporate networks, and there are insecurities there. A lot of insecure network access going on, and people using unfamiliar tools. So all of that leads to us doing things differently, not having our stuff configured right, and that is inherently a risk. And I think we're all feeling it. And these frauds are up because of that.
What are the challenges in the encryption domain during remote workplace access? What are your recommendations to protect from intruders?
Well, so there you go, right? The challenge is doing it correctly without a sysadmin, without the same tech support that you might be used to. These things just have to work. We're all using VPNs, so they have to work out of the box. So the challenges are going to be in configuration, in users not understanding how to set up their systems properly.
What is the single best way to combat the insidious threat of organized criminal ransomware groups from the perspective of a mid-tier low-cost organization?
Kind of obvious, right? Keep your patches up to date and have good backups. This is interesting. Ransomware is an incredibly effective business model right now. I mean, it is, near as I can tell, the most profitable cybercrime. And it really preys on users who don't have their systems configured right. They don't have their patches up to date, and they don't have good backups. If you want to defend against ransomware, it really is good system hygiene that makes you more secure than everybody else.
Is moving to elliptic curve cryptography-based asymmetric encryption happening too slowly given the development of quantum computers? If ECC is a viable alternative, why isn't it being adopted?
So there's a lot here. Quantum computers are being developed, and right now they are toys. We don't know if they will ever become viable computing platforms. There are hard engineering challenges. And I like to say that we don't know if hard means go to the moon hard or faster than light travel hard. We actually don't know. It's possible that we will never have quantum computers. It's possible we'll have them in 5 or 10 years. So right now, there is a competition going on in the United States. NIST is running a competition for quantum-resistant asymmetric encryption algorithms. So we know theoretically what a quantum computer could do. If we could build it, if it would work, we know its theoretical limitations. So we can design algorithms to be secure against those theoretical limitations. And we're doing that now, years, possibly decades, before we have a quantum computer, which is the right time to do it. So I'm pretty confident that we will have the math and cryptography in place before the engineering gets to the point where it's a problem. That's what's happening now. You know, we could learn different things, but that's what's going on now.
In a world where governments and multinational corporations alike survey, censor, and misinform, a populace consumed with being distracted from reality, relationships, and responsibility to its own demise, what are we to do?
This is hard. I don't have a good answer here. A lot of people are studying this, basically the power of corporations to determine what we see and don't see. And that is both censorship and misinformation, in addition to surveillance, right? Surveillance capitalism. And I think what we need to do here is policy and not technical. I mean, these are issues that have policy solutions, that certain business models have to be declared illegal, that certain business practices need to be regulated. The problem we have right now is that these corporations are monopolies. They're very powerful. That surveillance is their business model. And that brings with it all of these things. This is a problem bigger than any one country, but breaking up the tech monopolies would be an enormous boon to making this better. Regulating surveillance will be an enormous boon. Questioner asks, what about governments? And that's a real good point, that there very much is a public-private surveillance partnership where governments and corporations are working together to spy on us. And that's true in countries like the United States. It's also true in countries like China for different reasons. So this is a hard one, and we need to really figure it out. But I don't have a good answer.
Does the world really have to wait for generations so that senior politicians are replaced by people who understand technology, or will technologists rise up and replace the analog leaders?
You know, that's for us to decide. I mean, certainly in a lot of ways, we are going to have to wait for a new generation to become powerful. Right? In the United States, we just had an election between two people in their late 70s, which is crazy. You know, where is the younger generation? And I think that's going to be necessary to have politicians who understand technology. At the same time, technologists really do need to get involved in policy, get involved in politics, get involved in the non-tech aspects of the tech they're building. You know, maybe not as elected officials, but as advisors, as people within government, working for the press, for NGOs. There's a lot of need for what I call public interest technologists to spend their time and expertise making this all better.
How can leaders be educated about legacy IT equipment, what better ops looks like, and their impact on IT and procurement mistakes and disasters as it is?
It's the same question. And you get people in their late 70s and you probably can't educate them. We need both younger politicians and technical experts in society working for them. You know, in our world, it's never the case that you have to be an expert in a thing to legislate the thing. Right? In the United States, Congress people legislate farm policy and foreign policy and aircrafts and consumer goods and financial products and pharmaceuticals and all of these things. And they're not experts in any of them, or at most they're experts in one of them. Right? That's okay. They have experts on their staff. And we just need to make technology one of those things.
As a citizen of the world and member of the internet, who should we be more afraid of? China, Russia, or the US of A?
I don't know why I have to pick. You know, I don't think I have to rank my fears in terms of top 3, top 5. I think we should fear both governments and corporations, and then also criminals, that there are risks associated with all of them. I mean, I worry about totalitarian governments like China exporting their brand of surveillance for social control to countries around the world. I'm worried about Russia doing the same thing. mean, I'm worried about the US exporting its type of surveillance capitalism all around the world. I mean, there are different sorts of risks, different sorts of fears, and it really is their interrelation that is the most dangerous. So I tend to be worried about that.
End-to-end encryption, Five Eyes, politicians versus the world. How can we get politicians to understand there is no way back from end-to-end now that it's implemented?
Well, one, there is a way back down. You just declare it illegal, and that most of the major platforms don't do it. Remember, the politicians, the Five Eyes, they're not concerned about the little apps. They're not concerned about the one-offs. They're concerned about Facebook Messenger. They're concerned about WhatsApp, about Telegram. They might be concerned about Signal. Right? They're concerned about the things that millions of people use. Right? They're concerned about the iPhone encryption. So for the Five Eyes, legislating that those major platforms can't have secure encryption is a huge win for them. And that's what they're aiming for. They understand that if someone listening to me writes an encryption app, it'll be end-to-end encrypted and they can't break into it. They're okay with that because that's going to be the exception.
10 years ago, security issues like buffer overflow and cross-site scripting are so prevalent, but it has been significantly reduced today due to newer programming languages. Do you think that most of the things that we're doing today in security would be obsolete and we would just focusing on improving AI/machine learning models in the area of anomaly detection, software fuzzing, IAM, etc. in the future?
This is a really interesting question. So I actually think that vulnerability finding is something that is going to be tackled by AI and machine learning in the near future. If you think about it, it's the kind of boring, repetitive task that you can imagine computers and ML systems being good at. Right? Finding, not just buffer overflows and cross-site scripting, but all sorts of software vulnerabilities. And so you could easily imagine we having a conference in 10 years where we talk about, wow, remember 10 years ago when software vulnerabilities were a thing? Before all the ML systems found them, before the ML systems were built into compilers and found them all before the software was released, right? And vulnerabilities could be a thing of the past. I don't know if that's going to happen. That's my bet. I think that's the future. Now, it's an interesting transition period. You go to that future, and there are no vulnerabilities in anything because ML systems find basically them all. But they also find vulnerabilities in all the fielded code and all the legacy systems. So while that happens, right, this ML system finds 100, 1,000, 10,000 vulnerabilities in Windows or in that Internet of Things thermostat that's no longer being maintained, or the Internet of Things toy that can't be patched, or your home router. But I think that AI machine learning will really change vulnerability finding and turn it from a human endeavor into an automatic endeavor. And I think that's going to be really interesting.
Do you feel the US has a point with their criticism on Huawei?
This is a complicated question. So I think we really need to worry about supply chain security, and that whether it's Huawei and Chinese backdoors or Cisco and US backdoors or Kaspersky and Russian backdoors, that these are all serious worries and we should take them seriously. I'm actually not concerned about Huawei spying on 5G equipment, right? I mean, if their routers made a copy of the data and shipped it to Shanghai, we would notice it. You can't hide that. We would notice that immediately. What I am worried about in all these cases is companies putting kill switches in the products. And, where we build our infrastructure in the United States on Huawei equipment, and if there are hostilities, they stop working, or they get degraded, or they start throwing errors. That, I think, is much harder to detect. And I can't imagine a country not doing that. I can't imagine the US not doing that. Right? My only hope is that there are hostilities, our stuff doesn't work, and their stuff doesn't work either. So I think these are real concerns, and they're hard. They're really hard to figure out. And it is just the tip of a very complicated iceberg. Right? Huawei is a Chinese company, and the question is, should you trust networking equipment from a country who you don't trust? But, even take, I don't know, an iPhone. Apple's a US company, but iPhones aren't made in the US. Their chips aren't made in the US. Their programmers carry 100 different passports. Right? So the supply chain is still very international in this US product. And there's just as much worry. But I think the worry really is more degradation than surveillance, because surveillance will be caught. It's just too obvious.
What new technology is the most interesting for you?
To me, the exciting new technologies are in AI, in automated decision making, in automated sensing, thinking, and acting. And I think that's where the discontinuous changes are coming. And it's really, it's things we don't expect. When I was a student in college, we learned that the game of Go would never be solved by an AI because it was computationally infeasible, because it would just blow up too fast. Until one year when Google solved it, because they were bored. And that was just a matter of increases in computing power. So there are a lot of discontinuous advances that are going to happen in AI. I think it'll be more disruptive than people think socially. And I don't think we are even beginning to think about the societal changes due to the technical changes. So I think that's where a lot of the excitement is right now.
Seeing that COVID is now normal, what advice do you have for students, those just graduating, who are now entering a new era, a society that operates very differently from 2019? It's hard to remain optimistic in the face of everything that's going on. Do you have any advice?
First, breathe, right? It is hard to remain optimistic. And I think we don't know what the future is going to be like. I think you're right that we're entering a new era that operates very differently for 2019, but we actually don't know what 2021 will look like. We don't know what parts of 2019 will come back, what parts of 2020 will carry over. So it's really hard to give advice because we're in such an area of uncertainty where we really don't know at all what's going on. I have students at the Harvard Kennedy School, and they went to graduate school even though it's by Zoom and remote and not very satisfying, because there's nothing else to do, because no one's hiring. You can't take a year off and backpack in South America. So you might as well go back to school. I think people are waiting and seeing. And I think that's the right thing to do. So I don't know if that's advice. Understand that it's hard to remain optimistic. No one's optimistic. We're all just trying to get by. Accept that and do the best you can, because it's going to be different.
There have been talks for a number of years that current encryption schemes will be weak against quantum computing. How will organizations adapt to this potential forthcoming issue?
They're not. I mean, the systems will adapt. I mentioned the NIST work being done on quantum resistant algorithms. I expect those to be all embedded into any system you use well before there's a quantum computer. So I don't think this is something that normal people have to worry about. The mathematicians are worrying about it, and that's enough. So I think we're actually doing that pretty well. So that's a good thing.
A personal one this time. During the One conference earlier this year, you said that you didn't know Club Mate. A promise was made to send you a box. Did you receive this box? And the question everybody's waiting for, how did you like it? Have you acquired a taste for Club Mate already?
I did not get a box. I remember that. That's right. I did not get a box. So if you know the one conference people, you should bug them.
What are your thoughts about more and more governments are pushing an agenda of weakening encryption, for example by demanding backdoors in communications?
I think this is bad. Now, to be fair, the pushing hasn't been very hard. The U.S. government is pushing for decades, and we still don't have any mandate. And a lot of it is posturing and threatening, but no actual work being done. Exceptions to the law passed in Australia, it's never been used. But the EU, the UK, the US, Australia, there's a lot of pushes for weakening encryption. But so far, there's been no weakening of encryption. I think this is bad. I mean, the way to describe this and talk about this is to not fall into the security versus privacy argument. That's a stupid argument. It's not even correct. It's a security versus security argument. Right? There is security in making our phones and computers encrypted, even though the law enforcement government can't spy on the bad guys. There's security value in letting governments spy on the bad guys, even though it also allows people to spy on the good guys. Which is better? Right? It's security versus security. And when you think about it that way, it seems pretty obvious that we need to adopt a defense dominant strategy. That as long as, an iPhone is in the hands of every elected official and politician and police officer and judge and CEO and nuclear power plant operator and voting official, that the value of making them secure outweighs the value of making them weak. And we need to talk about it that way. Right? Defense has to win. The internet is too critical to society to weaken it for the security value of spying on the bad guys. I think that's really important.
Acknowledging that technologies are only the tools being used and that it is the actor that sets intent, both for good and bad, how do we control this and prevent abuse?
This is hard, right? But this is true for all of society. All infrastructure can be used for good and bad. Right? Restaurants can feed us because we're working, but it could feed us because we're planning a kidnapping. Right? We can use a car for good purposes and bad purposes. We can use a telephone for good purposes and bad purposes. And we in society accept that. We accept that the positive uses of a tool, like the telephone, so outweigh the negative uses that we accept them. And we have to do that with internet technologies as well. Yes, the internet can be used for bad, but the uses for good are so much greater. So we try to punish the bad, as we do in every case, but we don't weaken the actual tool because the tool is much too valuable. And we could say automobiles can't drive more than, 40 kilometers an hour because we don't want them used as getaway vehicles by criminals. But we would never do that because we all want to drive more than 40 kilometers an hour. Right? So we don't weaken the infrastructure for the few bad uses.
What are your thoughts on the future security trends in light of COVID?
Well, I talked about the impacts of doing things differently, doing things from home, and I think that's what future trends are going to deal with. The fact that we have all distributed, that any notion of a secure enclave is gone, right? That security is now perimeterless and borderless, zero trust networks, all of these things. Right? COVID has shown us that we have to be able to be decentralized, we have to be able to be distributed, and security has to follow that. All right, so that's the questions. This was a lot of fun. I urge you, if you want to learn more about any of this stuff, Schneier.com is my website. That's where everything is. And I actually have essays on quantum computing, which you can read. I have essays on blockchain, and you did get a blockchain question. Some stuff on COVID and what's going on, and on backdoors and encryption. I also maintain a site for public interest technologist. It's publicinteresttech.com with hyphens. And there I talk about things we can do to get involved in policy. And it's my writings and other writings, and really I think important things for us to understand that when we're building a technology, we're building a world. I'm also part of Sir Tim Berners-Lee's Solid initiative. Sort of this is a new way of thinking about data ownership, allows us to control our data and to give permissions for others to use it, access to it, read and write. I think it really does have a potential to change the internet in the same way that Sir Tim Berners-Lee changed the internet when he invented the web. And that's a really exciting thing that I'm part of. So nice to virtually be with you all. I miss not being in Dubai. I liked flying there for other Hack in the Box conferences, and I hope to be there again next year in person. Thanks and goodbye.